Hi. All right. Today, this is my second video, and today I want to discuss a common controversy in bodybuilding, and that involves drinking milk. They had a campaign a couple of years ago that was sponsored by the National Dairy Board. I don't, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I don't even know if they still run these commercials. I haven't seen them in a while. But basically, the punchline was, milk is for everybody. And so the topic of this video is milk really for everybody, particularly bodybuilders and people that want to be fit and lose body fat and build muscle, that type of thing. There's a lot of right before I did this video, I kind of did a survey. I went on the internet and I looked at a couple of anti-milk sites and a couple of bodybuilding sites where they talked about milk. And I mean, some of the things I read were just completely absurd, based on nothing, which is common with the internet. That's the usual thing. But let's separate. Let's first of all talk about why drink milk at all, or what's the advantages of milk. Well, we can look at milk protein. Milk contains two major proteins. One of them is called whey, and the other one's casein. The percentages in milk consists of 80% casein and 20% whey, and milk protein does have the highest biological value of any known animal protein. So, this is why whey proteins, starting in the late 90s all the way up till now, they're the most popular supplemental proteins, and for good reason, because they are, they're very, very high in essential amino acids. The whey protein is, and a lot of people ask me, do I need to take a branched chain amino acid supplement if I'm taking a whey protein? And the answer to that is no, because if you look at the content by weight of branched chain amino acids in whey, you find that it's 26% of the protein content, or the amino acid content in whey, is actually branched chain amino acids. One of them in particular, called leucine, is the key amino acid to stimulating muscle protein synthesis. This is the amino acid that starts the whole process of muscle protein synthesis. Now, an important point here is that leucine does not work alone. Leucine does start the process, but you still have to have the presence of other essential amino acids. Essential means that they must be obtained in the diet, and they cannot be obtained, in other words, they can't be made in the body. They can't be synthesized in the body. You have to get it from an outside source. And the thing that makes whey so great is it's loaded with essential amino acids, and it's loaded with leucine. Each serving of whey has, if I remember correctly, about 2.5 or to 2.7 grams of leucine, which happens to be the exact amount you need to stimulate maximal muscle protein synthesis. And of course, it also contains abundant amounts of the other essential amino acids. So let's get that out of the way by saying that, yes, milk protein is very important for anybody that wants to build muscle. I can do a whole video on just whey alone, but maybe we'll do that for the future. Right now, though, I want to look into actual milk, because I mean, there's so much garbage on the internet and so much misconceptions about milk that I felt it was necessary to comment on this. But let's talk about, why do bodybuilders actually cut milk out? I mean, I've been competing since the 70s. I don't compete now. I mean, I haven't competed since the 70s. But when I competed all the way up to today, you hear bodybuilders before a contest, they always talk about how they cut out milk and dairy foods, right? And, the question is why? What is it about milk and dairy that makes them cut it out? I mean, is there something inherently fattening about milk that causes a bodybuilder to cut it out before a contest? Does it really smooth you out, like they say? Well, let's look. What is milk? I mean, what does it contain that could possibly be fattening, right? You take a cup of milk. A cup of milk has 8 grams of protein. Okay, that's great, because it has the casein, it has the whey. That's terrific, right? Now, a lot of people will say, and I checked a couple of websites before doing this video, they talked about the high carbohydrate content of milk. Really, a cup of milk actually has 12 grams of carbohydrate. I mean, if you drink like several quarts, you probably could get a large amount of carbohydrate, but I wouldn't call 12 grams of carbohydrate very high in carbohydrates. You know, that's in 1 cup of milk. Then the other reason why a lot of bodybuilders will cut out milk is because of its high sodium content. You know, sodium retains water, so they say, and you know that water kind of makes you. I mean, the sodium makes you hold water under your skin, kind of smooths you out. So yeah, you know, you got to cut that milk out before a contest. Really? Okay, how much sodium is in a cup of milk? 107 milligrams. That's not a lot of sodium. And here's what they overlook. A cup of milk also contains 366 milligrams of potassium. Now, the way it works in the body, if you have a certain ratio of potassium to sodium, the potassium tends to cause the sodium to be excreted out of the body. They call this the K ratio. And this is a little tip for anyone watching this. If for some reason you overconsume sodium, whether it's a processed food or whatever, what you do is you get a whole, you take a potassium supplement and calculate how much sodium you've ingested. And if you take in half as much potassium, you will actually eliminate any bloating, any sodium, any water retention effect caused by that sodium intake. So to give a graphic example, if you take in 1,000 milligrams of sodium, if you take 500 milligrams of potassium, the sodium, water retaining, blood pressure raising effect is neutralized. Now, look at the ratio in milk. It has 107 milligrams of sodium, and it has 366 milligrams of potassium, which basically means the sodium content of milk is a non-issue. So the stuff about how the sodium in milk causes water retention is nonsensical. It makes no sense at all, right? Okay, now, but you can't get away from the fact that there is something about milk. I mean, if you look at the nutritional content, there's really nothing in the nutrient profile of milk that would make it inherently super fattening or would cause it to be unusual in the sense of keeping you smooth and obscuring muscular definition. And yet, bodybuilders have found that from experience, it's called empirically, that when they cut out milk, it does seem to help them get a little bit more muscularly defined. Now, why would that be? You know, the answer is kind of strange, you know, and it's hard to believe, but I think the answer has to do with the actual the rich amino acid content of milk. Believe it or not, it's a concentrated form of essential amino acids. And what a lot of people don't realize is that those amino acids, some of them, particularly the branched chain and leucine, they stimulate insulin, and a pretty good insulin release. Now, when insulin is released, you also get a concomitant or let's say a side release of a adrenal hormone called aldosterone. And what aldosterone does is it causes a sodium retention and a potassium excretion. So it could be that some people might be more sensitive to this scenario. So when they drink milk, they get a little bit too much insulin output. Now, this is particularly true if they're already on a low carbohydrate diet, where they're kind of like restricting carbohydrate intake. If they drink milk, they're basically kicking out the insulin again. And, you know, because of that aldosterone effect, there might be a little bit of water retention in the skin. So, you know, the effect of milk smoothing you out could actually be real. But it's not because of the sodium. It's because of the insulin caused by the amino acids. Now, somebody might say at this point, now, wait a minute, you know, aren't those same amino acids in whey protein? I mean, doesn't whey protein also cause a insulin release? Yes, it does. But the difference is that, and this is where the key is, that most whey proteins, especially the higher quality ones, they are low in carbohydrates. So basically, there's no carbohydrates for the insulin to kind of react with. And basically, even though you do get a insulin output from whey, it's not the same effect as drinking straight milk. And I should add that everything I've just said in the last 5 minutes is totally theoretical on my part. Because again, if you look at the nutritional profile of milk, especially non-fat milk, where the fat is removed, there's nothing about it that really should cause any kind of water retention, right? Now, what about lactose? Okay, lactose is the main sugar in milk. and it's what they call a disaccharide. It's a double sugar. And it's broken down in the body by an enzyme called lactase. And a lot of people, as they age, they lose lactase ability. In other words, lactase tends to kind of get downgraded, and of course, then they get a condition called lactose intolerance, where when they drink milk, because they don't have enough lactase produced, the lactose in the milk tends to ferment, causes symptoms like bloating and flatulence, gas, discomfort and all that stuff. What they've shown in studies is that 95% of Asians, 74% of Native Americans, 70% of blacks, 53% of Mexicans, and 15% of Caucasians or whites are lactose intolerant. Now, there's an easy solution to this problem, of course. If you do want to drink milk, you have two choices. They have milk available that has been treated with lactase, where most of the lactose in the milk has been pre-digested, so you have no problem. Years ago, they started producing actual lactase supplements, where these little drops, you would add them to regular milk and give it some time. It would actually also pre-digest. It would break down the lactase in the milk, and therefore prevent any of the lactose intolerant symptoms. But even people that think they're lactose intolerant actually still have a little bit of lactase activity, and they can have small amounts of milks, and maybe like they could kind of test and see how much milk they could drink before they have these symptoms. But usually, even people that think they're lactose intolerant, they still have some lactase activity enough to have small amounts or consume small amounts of dairy products with no particular problems. And of course, you could eat foods such as cheese and yogurt, where the lactose is already broken down. There's no problem with that, right? I also want to mention here, speaking about lactose, there was a study, it's all over the internet when it came out. Basically, the headlines of this study was that milk kills you. And what this study involved, it involved women who, it was a Swedish study where women drank 3 glasses of milk a day, and they compared that to women that didn't drink the milk, and the women that drank the milk showed twice the levels of mortality or death compared to the women drinking 3 glasses of milk a day, right? Now, what caused that, right? Oh, I should add before, just to make it complete, and this is why you have to look at these studies and kind of scratch your head, what the heck's going on here? Because men didn't have any effect at all. There was no mortality, there was nothing. The women who drank the milk, not only did they supposedly die at twice the rate, but they also had increased rates of hip fractures, which is unusual because the calcium in milk is supposed to prevent hip fractures, right? Again, the men showed no increased rate of hip fractures and no increased rate of mortality, right? Also, those who drank fermented milk, cheese, and ate yogurt also showed no problems at all. So, what was the theory of the researchers as to why milk kind of killed these women? The theory was that milk, the lactose, the sugar in milk, it breaks down into, remember I said it's a disaccharide, it's a double sugar, which means it contains 2 monounsaccharides or single sugars. And lactose breaks them down into the constituent parts of lactose, which is glucose, the same sugar that's in your blood, and the other one is called galactose. And according to the researchers, they think it's the galactose that caused the problem in the women, because galactose, if you feed large amounts of it to animals like lab rats, it causes like a low-level inflammation. And according to the study authors, they think the low-level inflammation that was produced by galactose being broken down from lactose and the women that drank milk caused the increased mortality. But again, that doesn't explain why No men at all showed this problem. And another thing to take into account is that this is what they call an observational epidemiological study, which means it was based on questionnaires. There was no cause and effect. And you have to always go by the scientific principle of correlation does not prove causation. In other words, they could not find any precise cause of why the women who drank 3 glasses of milk a day showed increased mortality. In other words, it could have been from something completely unrelated to milk. But my biggest red flag in this study is, again, the fact that drinking milk had no effect at all on the mortality of men. So I think basically we could dismiss that study. Let's move on to another study that's commonly quoted over the internet for reasons to avoid milk. And this study was called the China study. And the China study was done by a guy named T. Colin Campbell. And this guy has a very stellar background. He was a professor of nutritional biochemistry at Cornell University, and he has published over 300 papers on nutrition. And anyway, to make a long story short, this guy went to China and he kind of studied people living in outlying villages. I think he studied a little over 6,000 people. And he deduced that eating animal protein is very dangerous. And to underscore his point, he devised a rat study where they gave rats a known carcinogen called aflatoxin. This stuff grows on peanuts and spoiled grains, and it's a known cause of liver cancer, right? So he gave these rats aflatoxin, so he's basically giving them a known cause of cancer. Now here's the interesting part of the study. One group of rats he put on a diet containing 5% casein. Remember, casein, that's one of the two, that's actually the dominant protein in milk. 80% of milk protein is casein, the other 20% being whey. So he put one group of rats on a 5% casein diet, and the other group of rats he put on a 20% casein diet. So what happened? The rats that consumed the 20% casein diet, they died of cancer, right? Whereas the rats, much fewer of the rats on the 5% group died of cancer, right? So based on that, he concluded that casein is a carcinogen. In other words, it will cause cancer not only in rats, but he made the huge leap and said that casein and all animal proteins are potential carcinogens. So what this professor of nutrition was saying is that people that eat animal proteins are doomed to die of cancer because plant proteins, according to him, do not have the same effect, right? Here's some of the things he didn't tell you in the China study. It turns out that, get this, the rats that were in the 5% casein group, they didn't die as rapidly of cancer as the 20% casein, but guess what? They died faster. You know why? Because rats cannot process, their livers don't work right unless they have a certain amount of protein. And because they were deprived of protein, they died faster than the rats in the 20% group. He doesn't tell you that. And he talks about how people should eat, plant foods and wheat and all that stuff. But here's the kicker. If you add the amino acid, wheat, and let's take wheat and grains, that's a huge part of vegan diets. Yeah, but an interesting thing happens. These particular proteins, let's talk about gluten, the famous protein gluten, that's a wheat protein, right? If you add the amino acid lysine to wheat and gluten, it becomes exactly as carcinogenic as casein. Now you say, okay, what does that mean? Okay, here's the way it works. The only reason why animal proteins such as casein could possibly stimulate cancer is because animal proteins are replete. They contain all the essential amino acids, and because of that, they stimulate growth. They stimulate growth of all tissues. And theoretically, they could also stimulate cancer. But it's a big stretch between causing cancer and stimulating cancer. And there's not a drop of evidence that eating animal proteins causes cancer. So his study basically is we could discard that, because if it was true, that means everybody who's eating animal protein would be dying left and right of cancer. It's nonsensical and it's plain stupid, right? So forget that one, right? So I got a little outline here. Also, I want to point out that studies, all right, casein. First of all, another thing I wanted to say is that casein, the way they gave it to the rats in the China study, is going to be completely artificial. Because, no human comes close to eating 20% of their entire diet. That would be a massive amount of casein. You're eating an isolated protein, and when you do that, strange things can happen. And I still don't think that casein would cause cancer, but it bears no relation to reality, because no human being on earth will ever consume a 20% casein diet. That's a massive amount of casein, right? Another thing that's overlooked is that, and by Campbell and others who always quote the China study, is the fact that if you do a search, you'll find there's dozens of studies showing that whey protein, which is the other protein in milk, there's a number of studies showing that it has a reverse effect. It actually prevents several types of cancer. And the mechanism, they think, could be the fact that whey protein is high in an amino acid called cysteine, which is the precursor to an antioxidant in the body called glutathione. And the glutathione has a potent anti-cancer effect. So when you take in proteins, milk protein I should say, you're taking in casein and whey, which so basically there's no problem. And for those of you that are supplementing, let's say casein alone, because casein does have one advantage over whey, it's a long-acting protein. It tends to be slowly released over a period of 7 hours, compared to whey lasting about 90 minutes. I would not worry about this situation. Don't think that by using a casein supplement, you're putting yourself at risk for cancer. It's nonsensical. If you, let's say, consumed maybe 2 pounds of casein a day, or took it before you went to sleep, then I would say you might have a problem. It might not be with cancer, but it'll be with severe indigestion. So forget the casein nonsense, because that's what it is. It's nonsense. And okay, then now we move on to still another controversy, and this has to do again with casein, because you find that a lot of people don't know this, but milk contains a bunch of smaller proteins besides casein and whey. A lot of these things are referred to as bioactive peptides. And casein itself has different fractions, and among the fractions of casein are the what they call the A1 and the A2 fraction, right? And what they found is different cows tend to produce either one or the other. Some cows produce more of A1, some cows produce more of A2 fraction, right? Now the controversy arises because the A1 fraction, some people claim that it causes type 1 diabetes through an autoimmune reaction. This is the type of diabetes that has nothing to do with being overweight or consuming carbohydrates. It's caused by a destruction of the actual insulin-producing cells in the pancreas called the beta cells. And according to this theory, there's the consumption of the A1 casein fraction of protein somehow causes destruction to these beta cells, which leads to type 1 diabetes. The other claim is that A1 protein can cause cardiovascular disease by causing adverse changes in your blood lipids like cholesterol and low-density lipoprotein, right? Okay, now, what is the actual reason for this? Well, the reason is that supposedly when you consume milk from cows that are producing a preponderance of the A1 casein fraction, when it's digested in the body, it produces a peptide called BCM7, right? BCM7 is the actual destructive element of A1 that allegedly causes all these problems, right? Well, here's the problem. I mean, here's the answer to this little controversy. They've done numerous studies. They've tested this. They've given people, humans, they've given humans milk that's high in the A1 fraction, and then they've tested their blood. They noted no change in cholesterol, no change in lipids, and most importantly of all, they could not detect the presence of the BCM7 protein. It was not even detectable in the blood. So you're going to read all over the internet about how dangerous milk, or in particular casein, is, because this A1 fraction, it's going to cause heart disease and it's going to kill you. Bull! It doesn't do any of that. It's an outright lie. And okay, so let's discard that one too. Let's move on to the next milk controversy, and this has to do. This one makes me laugh. I love this one. As a former bodybuilding competitor and a writer of bodybuilding for bodybuilding magazines for like 38 years, I get a kick out of this one. You might probably, if you go in any supermarket, you'll see that they sell organic milk. And on the carton, it talks about a feature. It says that the milk does not contain any recombinant bovine growth hormones. With the implication that if you consume regular milk, you're getting these bovine growth hormones. It's in the milk, and you're going to be like, ingesting all these growth hormones. And gee, what can that do? You're ingesting growth hormone. Couldn't that cause a problem? Okay, there's two problems with that. First of all, the main thing to consider is that growth hormone is what they call a polypeptide hormone. It's a string of 191 amino acids. That's human growth hormone. Bovine growth hormone is not the same structure as human growth hormone. But anyway, let's talk about human growth hormone. Why is it that you have to take human growth hormone in injectable form? Why can't you take it in a pill? I'll tell you why. Because it's a peptide hormone. All it is a protein. It's a string of amino acids. If you take it orally, it'll be digested in your stomach just like any other protein in food. It'll break down, and you're left with a bunch of amino acids that have no bioactivity. That's why you have to inject growth hormone. Okay, you say to me, what does it have to do with cow growth hormone or bovine growth hormone? Well, bovine growth hormone, guess what? It's not the same structure as human growth hormone, and it can't interact with growth hormone receptors in the human body. So even if you could absorb bovine growth hormone from milk, it wouldn't do anything. Because it has no activity in the human body. And I've been reading these articles on these various websites telling bodybuilders, don't drink milk, it's loaded with growth hormone, it'll screw you up, blah blah blah, it'll cause all these growth hormone side effects. It's absurd. It's so stupid. I can't believe these people are writing this stuff, right? But anyway, another thing to consider is the fact that what was I going to say? Gee, I was so stupid that I lost my train of thought here. Oh, the one thing I was going to tell you, why do they give growth hormone at all to cows? Why do they give cows bovine growth hormone? They give it to it because, the dairy farms are very greedy. They don't care about the health of the cow, and they want to stimulate as much milk production as possible. And when they give growth hormone to these poor cows, it kind of like forces them to produce more milk, but it also causes the cow udders, the udders where the milk was produced, it causes them to get a severe infection called mastitis, which is a very cruel thing to do to these animals. So, I don't really drink a lot of milk myself, but if I did drink milk, I would drink organic milk, not because of the fact that it's free of growth hormone, only because I don't want to support the torture of these cows, being given growth hormone to kick out more milk. And there is one other little thing which I personally, this is a personal observation, this is not from any science study, that I've noticed. Again, I don't drink milk right now, but when I was drinking it, what I noticed was the regular milk, the stuff that's not organic milk, it has an expiration date on it. And I'd buy this milk, and I'd buy it fresh, I'd put it in the refrigerator, and in every case, if I didn't drink that milk right away, it would usually turn sour within 2 to 3 days, and that's refrigerated milk, right? And I can't really explain why this happened, other than the fact that that milk has probably been sitting around for a long time, and it's already past its expiration date. In other words, the expiration date on the bottle of milk is false. It's not a true expiration date. The milk, when you buy it, is already close to being expired in the sense of it's going to turn sour, right? Now, if you look at a carton of organic milk, which is about 2 or 3 times more expensive, you will find that the expiration date is usually much longer, as much as a month to 2 months more than regular milk. And what I found when I started using the organic milk is that that stuff never went bad. Never. I would keep that stuff in my refrigerator because I drink so little milk. I'd keep it there for as long as 6-7 weeks. Never once went sour. So for those of you that drink milk, it's something to consider. The organic milk, true, it's cost more money, but it really does stay fresher a lot longer. Now, related to the growth hormone thing, there's another controversy, and again, this is just as stupid as the growth hormone one, and although there's a slight grain of truth to this one. This has to do with IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. And again, a lot of the anti-milk sites over the internet will say that milk contains insulin-like growth factor 1, and they will point out that insulin-like, or let's call it IGF-1, has been implicated in stimulating some kinds of cancer, particularly colon and breast cancer. Okay, the first problem with that is there's no direct causal evidence, cause and effect evidence, that IGF-1 itself causes these kinds of cancer. What happens is tumors that are already present in these organs, let's say the breasts and the colon, they themselves will actually produce locally IGF-1. Why do they do that? They do that because one of the effects of IGF-1 is that it prevents a process called apoptosis, which has to do with this the suicide of a cell. The cells basically initiate a program that causes self-destruction. This is a normal action in the body. Whenever cells are detected that are wrong or aren't replicating properly, it's detected and the cells wind up literally blowing themselves up, killing themselves. That's called apoptosis. Now, IGF-1 actually prevents that. So you can see why tumor cells have evolved, or somehow, I don't know how they do it, but they locally produce IGF-1 and it prevents them from self-destruction. In other words, it keeps them going. Get it? And the IGF-1 also helps the tumor spread to other parts of the body, a process called metastasis. But to say that IGF-1 itself causes cancer is illogical and makes no sense, and it's based on nothing, right? Now, let's talk about, I'm going to have to quote my thing here, my little outline here. Okay, what they've shown is that some studies have shown that 10 to 20 adults that drink milk show an increase of IGF-1 in their blood of 10 to 20%. Now, you might think about that for a second. 10 to 20%. That sounds like a lot. Maybe it is dangerous to drink milk, I mean, IGF-1, gee, wouldn't that cause some of the growth hormone side effects, like, make your jaw big and make your tongue big and give you that weird kind of caveman face? I mean, wouldn't IGF-1 do that stuff? And 20%, gee, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Well, there's a problem with that. First of all, IGF-1, again, we're talking about a polypeptide hormone, just like growth hormone. The only difference being that IGF-1, whereas growth hormone is 191 amino acids, IGF-1 is 70 amino acids. It's a chain of amino acids. Therefore, it has to go through the very hostile digestive process, all that acid in the stomach, which will break down the amino acids. So you sit back and say, now, wait a minute. If that's true, then how is it that people who drink milk have been shown to have a 10 to 20% increase in IGF-1? And here's the answer. It's kind of interesting. You know why IGF-1 is absorbed in milk? Because one of those casein bioactive fractions I mentioned earlier, it actually kind of like chelate, it kind of like combines with the IGF-1 that's naturally in the milk, and it kind of forms like a shield. So it kind of like sneaks the IGF-1 past the digestive barrier. It prevents it from being broken down and denatured, and it allows it to get into the body. It's kind of like a Trojan horse effect. If you remember the story of the Trojan horse, right? That's how IGF-1 is absorbed. So it's true. Some IGF-1 is actually absorbed, right? Now, here's the problem, though, with that. And here's the part that's left out in all those articles over the internet where they talk about, drinking milk is going to give you cancer. It's going to give you acne because of IGF-1, right? Okay, the amount of IGF-1 typically found in milk represents 0.09% of the amount you produce in your body every day. That's a fraction of not even 1%, and that's in even huge amounts of milk. It's a tiny amount, right? The 10 to 20% is meaningless because it's a tiny fraction. It's not going to do anything. Get this. To get enough IGF-1 in your blood where it's able to be measured, a measurable amount of IGF-1 in your blood from drinking milk alone, you'd have to drink 95 quarts of milk. 95 quarts of milk. And guess what? Drinking that much milk, you won't have to worry about IGF-1. You're going to have a lot of other problems. You know what I'm saying? Forget about bloated abdomens. You're going to just blow up if you drink that much milk, right? Now, IGF-1, though, here's where the grain of truth comes in. What stimulates IGF-1 production in the body? IGF-1 is produced in the liver, and it's also produced in muscles, but that's a whole different story. But the IGF-1 produced in the liver, what's the food element that stimulates IGF-1? Protein, amino acids. And milk is, of course, rich in essential amino acids. So here's where the grain of truth comes in. If you drink milk because of its rich content of amino acids, you are going to get a little bit of an increased IGF-1. Not enough to cause problems, but enough to keep you healthy. Because among other functions, IGF-1 maintains the neurons in your brain, your cardiomyocytes, your heart muscle cells, and your muscles and your connective tissue. So you do want some IGF-1, for crying out loud, Don't worry about it, okay? So let's again eliminate these idiotic IGF-1, right? And here's another one. This one, a lot of you who are viewing this video, you probably heard of this one. In fact, a famous bodybuilder actually told me years ago. He was a Mr. Olympia. And I asked him why I still remember this conversation. I said, why do you cut milk out before a contest? And his answer was, well, milk is high in estrogen. Cows produce estrogen. Cows are females, and they produce estrogen. And, milk's loaded with estrogen. You know what estrogen does, Jerry? It causes subcutaneous fat under the skin. It causes you to have water retention. It makes you bloated. Of course I cut milk out before a contest, right? Okay, let's talk about the truth of that statement. Does milk contain estrogen? Yes, it does contain estrogen. There's no doubt about it. It contains estrogen. But you have to consider this. I have to give you a brief background so you understand. Estrogen is a general term. There's 3 kinds of estrogen. The most potent type of estrogen is called 17-beta estradiol, right? This is the main estrogen. This is the one that's associated with cancer. It's the only hormone in the body that's officially listed as a carcinogen because it's known to cause breast cancer and endometrial cancer in women, right? Okay, the other 2 estrogens are, one's called estrone, which is 5 times weaker, a minimum of 5 times weaker than 17-beta estradiol. Let's call it estradiol. Estrone is 5 times weaker than estradiol, right? And estrone happens to be the predominant estrogen in postmenopausal women. When they get older, their ovaries tend to, stop making or downgrade their production of estradiol, but the rest of their body still, their fat tissues, they can convert androgens such as androstenedione into a form of estrogen. And that form of estrogen that's predominant in older women is estrone. Estrone can be converted to estradiol, but usually is not. It's basically kind of a very, very weak form of estrogen. The third one is estriol, And estriol, you don't even have to talk about, because that's basically only shows up in pregnant women. So all you guys don't have to worry about estriol unless you somehow get pregnant. And I'm going to get to that in a second. You guys that are drinking breast milk, you better be careful. But anyway, the point is that we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so as far as the estrogen content of milk, the question that you have to answer at this point: just how much estrogen is there in milk? Should we be really concerned? Okay, let's consider this. First of all, the predominant, I had to tell you that about the 3 types of estrogen, because guess what? The type of estrogen that's in milk is not estradiol, the one that's by far the most potent estrogen, but it's actually estrone, also called E1. That's the predominant estrogen in milk. Estrone, not estradiol. That's an important point, because estrone is relatively weak, right? Now, you say to me, well, oh, yeah, I know, but still an estrogen. I mean, what the heck, I mean, shouldn't we be concerned about that? I mean, well, here's the thing. Consider this. Both men and women, even though estrogen is always called a female hormone, it's also made in men's bodies, right? It does a couple of important things in men. It's related to cardiovascular health. It's related to your bone health, your bone mass. What happens is when you secrete testosterone as a man, well, women secrete testosterone too, but let's talk about men here. When you secrete testosterone, I'm talking about men, about 8% of it is converted into estrogen, and this estrogen helps to maintain your bone mass so you don't get a disease like osteoporosis. And estrogen does a couple of other things. It's also needed for fertility in men, and I can go on, but let's just say that estrogen, a certain amount of estrogen, not a lot, but a certain amount is important for men's health, right? So as a consequence, men produce estrogen every day, and they produce it in almost the same way women do. It's produced as a consequence of what they call aromatization of testosterone and other androgens. The enzyme aromatase, which is ubiquitous all over the body, it's in the brain, it's in the liver, it's in the muscles, and especially in peripheral fat areas like your arms and your legs. That enzyme aromatase converts your androgens into estrogen, and that's the main source of estrogens in men. And secondarily, some estrogen is also produced, get this, in the same part of your body that produces most of your testosterone. Your testes also produce estrogen, right? So it's produced. Now, how much is produced? Okay, the daily synthesis rate in humans of estrogen ranges from 54,000 to 630,000 nanograms. And that's a nanogram is a billionth of a gram, very small amount, right? But remember those figures, 54,000 to 630,000 nanograms, right? That, and the lower figure, the 54,000, that would probably be what men produce. And the upper figure would be what women produce on a daily basis, right? And by the way, just as a sidebar, guys who use bodybuilders or whatever, and athletes who use massive amounts of steroids without taking drugs like Novadex or Arimidex that block the estrogen, they have been found to have higher estrogen levels than young women. I just wanted to throw that in as an interesting kind of factoid. But anyway, that's why they get gyno and all those side effects. But anyway, all right, so, the human body produces 54,000 to 630 nanograms, right? Now, how much estrogen is in milk? I mean that bodybuilder, that Mr. Olympia, he told me that milk's loaded with estrogen. Huh. Well, let's see. 3 servings a day of whole milk contain 68 nanograms. 68 nanograms. Think about it. Compare that to 54,000 that you make in your body every day. And you'll say to me, well, could that do anything? Even that 68 nanograms, remember, that's 3 cups of milk. Could that do anything adversely? Okay, here's the way it works. The FDA has found that, by the way, these 68 nanograms, that represents 0.01% to 0.1% of the total daily production of estrogens in humans, right? Now, what the FDA has found is any food that contains a level of estrogen, including milk, that contains less than 1% of the daily natural or endogenous production in humans of estrogen. Listen carefully, folks. It has zero physiological effects in the human body. So the estrogen in milk, yeah, there's estrogen in milk. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. Forget the stupid websites and the jerky forums and whatever they are that keep telling, oh, estrogen makes you fat, it makes you bloat. It's not the estrogen in milk. That estrogen and from other sources, made in your own body, of course. If you take too many, androgens that convert to estrogen, that's a whole different ball game. But we're talking about milk here, and the estrogens in milk are a non-issue. Forget it. Not even to women. Non-issue. Non-issue. Okay, here's the last topic. This video is getting a little long, but hopefully, you're getting some information from it. But here's the last issue I wanted to talk about, and this to me is absolutely hilarious. This is so, I have to talk about this stuff. There's a fad going around now where various websites and the forums and what do they call them, groups related to bodybuilding. I mean, they have guys getting on who are talking about all the massive muscular gains they're making from drinking human breast milk. Human breast milk they're drinking, right? I right before doing this video, I went onto a forum, and I don't know if this guy was being serious, but he says, I keep a girlfriend, one of my girlfriends, I keep her solely to provide me with breast milk so I could make gains. And this guy needs a straitjacket really fast. But anyway, is there any truth to that, right? First of all, let's consider, why would anyone think that breast milk is some sort of super anabolic? Okay, the obvious answer is because who drinks breast milk? Babies, right? What is the fastest growth in a human being? Babies. Babies grow fast. That's the fastest growth that ever occurs in human beings. So the theory is that there's something in breast milk that stimulates growth in babies, and it must contain these growth factors that are not in regular milk. But geez, if you drink that, boy, your muscles, you're going to look like Mr. Olympia like in a month. A little bit of problem to that silliness. First of all, babies, infants, their digestive system, it's a lot more permeable than adults. They can absorb larger proteins, like some of these growth factors that are impossible for an adult to absorb. That's the first thing. So, the growth factors in breast milk are not going to do you any good. Even the IGF-1 in there, it's not going to do you any good, right? Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, by the way, they're also selling, from what I understand, they're selling breast milk in ice cream. There's a breast milk ice cream, and there's also a lollipop breast milk flavored lollipop, right? Anyway, what's the problem with is there an actual problem with breast milk? Yes, there is, and here it is. What they found is that breast milk, depending on what the woman ate or what kind of environment she's living in, breast milk absorbs environmental pollutants. So that thing could have, God knows what, it could have actual substance in there, which conversely actually block testosterone usage and actually contain environmental estrogens, which could be a problem. That's the first thing. And they could just adversely affect your health. In fact, they found that samples of breast milk, they found that when they've tested samples of breast milk, I should say, 93% of them have been contaminated, I should say, with bacteria. They're bacterially contaminated. Because you have to understand something. Breast milk, remember I talked about earlier how the regular commercial milk goes bad in 3 days, even if you keep it in the refrigerator? Guess what? Human breast milk goes instantaneously bad. That's why when women breastfeed their babies, they do it right away. Of course, some of them like make extra to keep in the refrigerator, but, if you try and ship it like in dry ice like they're doing, from what I understand, the odds are the breast milk has already gone bad. It's already infested with all kinds of bacteria and contaminants. It's basically dirty. Why would you drink that? It's not going to cause any growth. It's not going to. It also could be contaminated with viruses, including hepatitis A and B, HIV, and even syphilis. You know, God knows, you have no idea where this breast milk came from. Any woman crazy enough to sell a breast milk, you got to suspect right away. Any drug she's taking, if she's some sort of drug addict, it's going to be, some of that residue is also going to be in the breast milk. So forget that. It can also contain residues of tobacco, alcohol, and prescription drugs, right? So it can also, by the way, some of the breast milk that is being shipped out and sold on the internet sites to make more money, they're actually adding, some of these unscrupulous pricks that are selling this stuff are adding cow's milk and soy milk. They're diluting it. And you know, you get it, the schmucks that buy this breast milk, they don't know that's diluted. They think they're getting 100% breast milk when they can be getting a small amount. It's kind of like the black market steroid stuff where you buy whatever, Decadurablin, and it turns out to be, who knows, vegetable oil. You know, you have no idea unless you analyze it, right? So, you know, when you sum it all up, what can you say about this breast milk stuff? Well, let me quote Arnold Schwarzenegger. Milk is for babies. Remember he said that in Pumping Iron. Milk is for babies, and it should be left in babies, okay? So I just want to end this video. I know, I'm sorry for being so long-winded here. I know I've talked a long time. You know, hopefully, again, you guys got something out of it. You know, but I just want to mention, you know, that, you know, I have my newsletter. It's called Applied Metabolics Newsletter. It's at www.appliedmetabolics.com. This is a very in-depth newsletter. I talk about nutrition, ergogenic aids, anti-aging, exercise science. I discuss the truth about various food supplements, fat loss, you know, exercise science. You're not going to find the information that I'm writing about in any on any website, and certainly not in any magazines. No way. They're not going to be in any magazines. I guarantee anyone who reads this, I don't care what your level of experience or academic knowledge is, you will learn something from reading my newsletter. You will get a lot of benefit from it. And then, just to give you an example, in the next issue, which comes out July 1st, I talk about this factor that's the underlying cause or the underlying reason for gains in muscle mass and size from any type of workout program. I explain it in depth. It's never really been discussed before. And I also talk about ways to promote this particular concept, right? I also, speaking about IGF-1, I also discuss IGF-1 in a new study, or the first study ever done with athletes about IGF-1, and we'll talk about some of the factors of IGF-1, whether it works or not, and you know, what this study found, basically. Then I have a really great article on fat burners, the fat burner supplements. You know, this is a question I've been asked for 30 years. Do these commercial or over-the-counter fat burners, do they really work? Will they really help you lose body fat? Well, I'm going to tell you in this article whether they do or not, and I analyze 3 typical commercial fat burners, including all the ingredients that are in these fat burners. I talk about some fat burners that really do work, that are really effective, and I talk about the traditional medical ways that the doctors will treat you to lose excess body fat. It's all in that article. And then I have an article about, I review a new book about strength training for people who are over 50. And you know, my book reviews, I don't just talk about, you know, what's in each chapter. My book reviews go into a lot more depth, and I talk about some of the problems that people over 50 face when they want to either return to lifting weights or getting back in shape. You know, the obstacles and the benefits of getting into a strength training program when you are 50 or over. And I also point out that it's never too late, because people that are, they've shown in studies, people that are even 90 years old can actually make some gains in muscle mass and strength. Anyway, that's it. And again, please consider subscribing to my newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. I mean, I call it a newsletter, but it's actually a monthly ebook. It's 40 to 50 pages, no commercials, no ads, no bullshit, I promise you. Anyway, take care. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.